Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's My Games recruitment show, where, as I'm sure you can see, we're going to be talking about getting vacancies from networking events. And to do that, we have a very special guest who is Kerry Swift, who is our real networking expert. Hi, Kerry, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
I like to think of her as the queen of networking, but
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And of course, he couldn't wait for me to introduce him. We do have the magnificent Mike Ames here today as well. How you doing, big guy?
if I was any better, I'd be twins. I'm really that good. Plus the fact, as you can see, I'm dressed for golf because I'm playing golf later. So that's even better, isn't it, really?
Oh, well, then it's a swan day today.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to tell people why we've invited Kerry here today? Because she is the queen of networking, but let's explain why.
She is. Yeah. Okay. So Kerry is a client, and obviously we speak fairly often. And what's become clear to me over the time that I've known her is that she really gets recruitment. So her recruitment company is Beam Recruit, and she focuses very much on rapid growth companies, SMEs who are looking to scale, right? And she supports them in their recruitment needs. But just talking to her, it became very clear to me early on that she totally gets networking and what a network means as a noun. And I wanted to start off, before I bring her in, I wanted to start off, if it's okay, with just a definition of a network and networking, because I think it's been a bit lost in translation a little bit. And I need to share this because Kerry's going to talk about this as we go through, but from a very practical kind of standpoint. So that's a network. It's been around for thousands of years. Whether it was the Masons or the Skull and Bones Club from Yale University or whatever it is, or upper class English men going to the same school, the same university. It doesn't make any difference, really. And I don't agree with all of those because they're all men, basically. But a network is simply a group of people. And the operative words there are willing and able. They're willing to help you because you've helped them, and that's the deal. And they're able to help you because they're in a position of power or influence or standing, some kind of knowledge that they have that you want. And it can be in your personal and your professional lives. Now, when you accept that networking is a noun, it's a physical thing, it's actually a collection of people, then networking becomes easy. It's just the act of building and maintaining that network. Now, that can involve going to events, but it doesn't have to. I rarely go myself, but I have an enormous and very strong network. But for many recruiters, networking means going to events. And the reason I wanted Kerry to come is that she is very good at that. And she doesn't just go and lucky dip, which a lot of people do. She's a very determined networker. And I wanted her to come and talk about that. Kerry, have I introduced you properly there? Have you got anything you'd like to add to that before Kirsty starts peppering you with questions?
No, I love the Queen bit, but yeah, no, that's fine.
Where's your crown? Where's your crown? I don't know.
It's only fair. So, just as we get started, we have got somebody saying that they're a first timer after meeting us at the team conference last week. So, if there are any new people, the way it works, if you've got any questions for Mike or for Kerry, feel free to pop them in and I will bring them up as we go through. So, Kerry, first question I'm going to ask is, I think the place that we start with networking, how do I pick which event to go to and how do I know that it's the right one for me?
I think the important thing is research is key. You need to find the right group that is right for you. And I think the beginning bit of that is you being clear on who your target market is, who your target audience is. Because if you haven't got a clear message and you don't know who you're going to target, then you're not going to know what group is right for you. So, and this sounds like the basics, but I fell into this trap. I didn't do this. You need to get the basics of the time, the format, the location, the cost. Is there a monthly cost, a weekly cost? You know, what other members are in that group as well? Who is in that group? So I think you need to have a realistic expectation of when you choose those events, what are the expectations, first off? And secondly, you know, who's going to be there, what people are going to be in that group. That's really important.
Can I just ask a question of the audience before we go any further? Are there any people watching this who really get a lot from networking events that they go to? Or are there any of you that sometimes wonder, well, why the hell did I just go there then? I'd be interested if you can put them into the comments. That would be really useful. Can I just draw you back to this, a very important point that you made there, is clarity over who is going to be at the event. Because I know a lot of people who basically are selling to corporates, that's their market, who still go to events, but actually the people that they would normally sell to are not going to go to those events. And if they are going to go to those events, they're not going to buy from somebody that shakes their hands and gives them a business card, right? So what advice would you give about figuring out what are the right events for people if in their business?
So my background is I come from big corporates. We never done formal networking. We'd done traditional cold call and BD. So we never went to networking events. And you were always trained, who can they give me business? Is there an end user client going to be there? But you need to think differently. You need to think about what people can refer you and recommend you who also work with your end user client. So at those events, your end user client may not be there, but there may be intermediary people who also work with those end user clients who could introduce you. And that's why it's really important. So a lot of these events, depending if it's mostly ones where you sign up per year, you can go as a visitor once or twice free normally. So my advice would be, when you're a visitor, maybe get a one-to-one booked in with one of the existing members. And then what you can then do is ask them what they find about the group. Have they had any positive results? What would they change? And speak to an existing member. That's really important.
That's an interesting point again that you make there, because I early on, years ago, I used to go to the odd BMI group. BMI had been around for many years, a kind of a formal networking group. And it wasn't for me because the people that I wanted to sell to never went. And I discovered the people who were there couldn't introduce me, by and large, to the people that I wanted. So it wasn't for me. But there's an interesting point there that's baked into their methodology. Is it, if you go, it's not about doing business with people in the room. Right? You can do that, obviously, but that's not what it's about at all. It's pretty much all focused on the people that they know. So it's their contacts. And what you're saying, I think, is that even if you're not going to a BMI meeting, you still have to have the same kind of mentality. It's not just selling to people in the room necessarily. It's who do they know that they could introduce you to. Is that correct?
It's about research, and that is correct. You know, ask for the distribution list, look on LinkedIn, look if there's any common connections between you both. Is there other people that you already know them that could introduce you? The person who's arranging the event, can they introduce you to that person? Ask them for an introduction prior. So I think research is key on the attendee list, and also who's in the groups.
And presumably as well, I mean, with LinkedIn now, if you've got an attendee list and you're connected to them, then you can see who they're connected to, who you'd be interested in.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Back in the day, you went somewhere you didn't know, really, didn't even get the list in many cases. But now we have a lot more tools, don't we, that we can use. There's a famous coach called Dan Sullivan, and he once said, all the money you need, it's in the pockets of the people you know and the pockets of the people they know. And I think that sums up real networking perfectly.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of really great comments. So somebody here, Kerry, completely agrees with you. Most of the face-to-face networking events that they do brings in business by referral. So it's very similar to what you're saying. Paul's saying here, he meets most of his prospects and clients. He is highly targeted. And like you were saying, he only attends events where he knows that those clients are going to be. And interestingly, I like here that he's been marketing to them in advance of the event.
Yeah.
So the event isn't the first time that he's had a connection with that individual, which I really, really liked.
Can I just ask Paul before you put those up, if possible? Paul, if you've got a chance to put this in as well, are those like regular kind of monthly networking events that you go to, or are they sort of, I don't know, industry events or things that you would go and meet on a kind of a one-off or once a year? I'd be interested to know, actually, because they're both valid.
Interestingly, Alison said something here that formal networking gives a better return on investment than the one-off events, which I think is interesting, and we probably will talk about. However, the reason I brought this one up last is because it leads nicely into the next section. Sometimes you can be at a bad event and meet that one person that opens doors for you, which I think is a really interesting point, Alison. And Kerry, I know that this is something that we've spoken about. At the event, you know, if I'm going to an event, maybe I've seen that a specific person is there or somebody who, how am I then supposed to build a relationship with that individual, with the target people that I'm going to the event to get? Because like Paul said, a lot of people are maybe going to be after the same person.
Just slightly backtracking to what Alison said, I do agree. I have found targeted formal networking has brought me better results than one-off events. I still mix it up and I still go to one-off events, but I'd say the targeted ones. For me, it's follow-up. It's booking those one-to-ones and building those relationships. It's building trust with people, and it's making it organic and not transactional. And it takes time, and it's not going to happen overnight. And also, you've got to give to get back. So you've got to open up and make those recommendations with not expecting anything back in return to start with, because you're opening that bank of trust, and I trust you, I'm going to recommend you. So that's really, really important. And I think
carry on.
So it's the one-to-ones and the regular building trust and the authenticity, and not just making recommendations for the sake of it. They've got to count.
Well, I wanted to pick up on a couple of things that you said there. And that first thing is that there's giving. Giving is important. And the very basis of a network is they're willing and able. People are willing and able to help you. And they're willing to help you because you've helped them. And we teach networking, not to recruiters, strangely enough, but to lawyers and accountants. We have a product for them to teach them how to properly network, real networking. It's called Network 101. And this is rule number one of networking. There it is. Rule number one, right there. Give before you ask. It's a mentality. And the second thing that I wanted to draw as well was a point that Kerry made, is that you're giving to the network, not to a person. So I know that sounds a kooky differential, but if I give to Kerry, I expect back from Kerry. And that's not necessarily how it works. If you give to the network will give back to you. I do know that sounds a bit happy clappy, doesn't it? And a bit, but it's so true, isn't it, Kerry? You know, if you give, strangely enough, it comes back to you.
100%. And I think once you get past that and you don't keep thinking what's in it for me, okay, we'll go to networking because we want to get a result from it. But I think by being kind, and you can be kind in networking, and you can still get results, it will come back, and it builds stronger relationships, and you keep those stronger relationships as well, rather than you just go into a one-off event and you throw in 20 business cards out and expecting to get something back. So it's like with anything, isn't it? You've got to grow a relationship, and it doesn't happen overnight. We do it with our clients. You've got to do it with your network as well. You've got to approach your network like you approach your clients in how you nurture them.
I think that's a really good point, because you're talking about the difference between a transactional salesperson, maybe like you were when you were at Page all those years ago. It's like the most important thing is the transaction. Got to make money. And if you're no use to me, if I'm talking to you and I can see you're no use to me, I'm off to the next. Versus a relationship salesperson, which is how I was trained in the 80s, which is much more about building relationships with the right people. These are people that are able to help you because they've got power or influence or knowledge in many cases. And all you need to do is build that relationship like you would any other relationship. And it's based mainly on giving. And I'd like to ask you a question on this as well. Giving and listening. How important is listening at events?
You go into mode of, I'm going to an event to sell. And I think you need to kind of get that out of your head. I think you've got to go and listen, pick up on those cues and listen to what things are important to people. Ask loads of questions as well. You know, asking questions is really important. But the key to listening, and just step back a little bit, and don't fall into that trap of that cheesy, as you said, 90s salesperson who is just going around the room to, you know, to gain it. But I also think as quickly as you build the relationship, you can damage it really quickly by doing the wrong things as well. So I think you've got to be careful of do what you say you're going to do. So if someone makes an introduction and it's not the right introduction, be honest with them. Or if you can't help that person, point them in the right direction. Just don't ignore it. I think that can affect a relationship by not saying what you're going to do.
I think you're right. I think there's an interesting thing about this helping piece as well. That if you're going to a one-off event, you absolutely have to go with some chunky content. So if we were going to a one-off, like a trade event, we would have a webinar coming up so that we could talk to people. Hey, look, why don't you come to our webinar, or a masterclass? Why don't you come to our masterclass? Or we've got a range of different pieces of chunky content. So that's content that you produce, which is almost good enough to buy. It's that good, right? And so we'll be using this to perpetuate the relationship after the event, for giving us a reason to get in touch, which isn't weird. I think with those events that you go to, which are predominantly kind of repeat events, you get to know people. It's less about that, isn't it? You don't need to worry about, oh, well, come to this thing, or we've done whatever. It's just talking to people and getting to know them and listening and learning about them, so that you can presumably not just business facts, but personal facts about people as well. Things they're interested in, things they're up to in their lives. So you can then have that continuity between, and presumably in between, the events.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, I do want to move on because we've got some great comments, and I know that some people really want to talk about some stuff here. So, Paul said that he attends mostly industry events, which are specific conferences, and there are a couple a year.
Yeah, that's me. That one actually.
Judith says exactly the same, although she does attend other ones. So, Paul here said that he has thousands of targets globally, so he goes to the 8 events that they will be at. He also targets them with marketing activity so that when they meet him, they know who he is. Now, that's the next question I want to ask.
I think that you can do that a little better if you've got if you're going to an event and you know there are people going to it, particularly, you can target them on LinkedIn. We do things like webinars sometimes. Just, oh, and by the way, we're going to be there. Why don't you let me know? We did it at a team event, didn't we? We went to team.
We did. So what I wanted to ask Kerry though was, obviously that's one way of sort of getting noticed in a group, is to do the prep work and use LinkedIn and stuff. Is there anything else that you can do perhaps at the physical event itself that helps you get noticed? Because as I said, there's going to be a lot of people going for those high value people. So how do you sort of get noticed?
I think going back to helping others with no financial gain, using your knowledge and your insights into your specific industry. So for example, a guest speaker. I've been a guest speaker at a couple of events. I've been invited to a few podcasts. The key is I'm not selling my business and what I do. I'm giving them knowledge from my industry, and you're giving them some little takeaways, some little pieces of knowledge. Because I think you've got to think of that as I'm putting in to get back out. And I think definitely the game changer for me has been trying to be a guest speaker, trying to be at an event, try and do a podcast. For sure, it shows you giving something back to the network.
Well,
and your knowledge.
And you're not selling today. In fact, most of the people tuning in are probably going to be recruiters, I would suggest. Not all of them, I know that, but some of them are. So you're not going to sell to those guys. But I think if you give to the network, weirdly, it comes back. And you've come on very kindly today, as I go on to the podcasts, and we talked about this quite a bit. The idea is to get into the habit of giving. But, and I've got a question for you, can you give to the wrong people?
100%, yes, you can. And look, I call them hunters, and there's nothing wrong with people being hunters if that's who they are and that's their main goal, to go and do that. But I think you can give to the wrong people. So I think it goes back to the strength of your relationships and the people that you're working with in your network, because it is about trust and it is about helping each other. And so yeah, you can give, and you can give too much up as well. okay, I know we're here to share our knowledge, but there's also a line as well that you've.
Okay, question on them then. So how can you spot a hunter, and how can you spot if you have become a hunter yourself, subconsciously, not consciously? Obviously no one will do
Okay,
that.
I'm just too soft not to become a hunter. I have found out you can be kind and do well in business still. I think you're not a hunter when you give as much as you get back. I've come across people where they take in networks, and I never see them giving anything back to the network. That is the key. And when straight away, they're asking for something off you immediately before you've even built the relationship, and they want something from you instantly. That's a bit of a red flag for me.
You can see them on LinkedIn as well. They're the kind of people that you would connect with, and then 2 minutes later, you've got a message basically pitching to you. It's the same group of people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's look, we're all human. We're not soft. I think the pandemic has made us realize that we can be more authentic. And look, there's a time and place for that approach. But I just think, for me, in my personal experience in the last 4 years, that just doesn't work for me.
Okay. No, in our course, again, for professional services people have to go to a lot of events, right? It's the thing with them. And in the course, we call them tatters, takers and takers, TATs, because you can tell straight away. And the biggest test, actually, you can give to people, just, help or whatever, and then ask for something and see what happens. Because takers rarely are prepared to give. They're only in it for the take. And so you can test a relationship really early on. If you've contributed and helped them and they don't help them back, off to the Russian front they go, because they're no use to you at all.
That leads me really nicely onto the next question that I had, Kerry, because obviously you can see from the title of this episode, which is how to get real vacancies from networking events. You don't want to be a taker, but obviously you do want to get something. And if I want to get vacancies from an event, how can I do that while still not being a hunter and still being respected? It feels like a dicey minefield from what we've been talking about.
I think so. If we don't say event and maybe say networking group, if you're in more of a structured networking group, I think once you establish a good relationship with somebody, you trust each other, you align to the same values, you've maybe got a similar target audience. I've found at some of my contacts, we will meet on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. We will create a target list between us and speak openly and say, who are you trying to get into? Who am I trying to get into? Can we maybe look at targeting it together? Can we recommend each other? It's done in an organic way. I need to make that clear. It's not done in a way where we're pinching each other's database, data protection, confidentiality. It's done in a safe space, and that's got to be done with people you really, really trust. But I have seen that work extremely, extremely well.
I want to talk about that because that's kind of a revelation in some spaces, because you think of a networking event, well, I'll go along and I'll drink, warm Chardonnay and chat to people and give my business card out. And even if you're into the relationship thing, you say, I'll go next month and do the same, and eventually stuff will come. But you're just taking it to a whole new level. You're basically saying, if I'm reading this correctly, I'm going to find some people that we can mutually help each other because of the people that we know. And we are systematically going to see how we can help each other. This isn't just a random drink over a vol-au-vent, is it? This is like, yeah, man, these are the companies I deal with, and I deal with these companies. What can we do to help each other? Is that what you're saying now?
Yeah, and what I want to say is I'm not in any groups where we are pressured to refer. Now, I know that can work for some people, so I'm not poo-pooing that. I know that can be successful. I'm not in any groups where you're under pressure to do that. So it does have to be organic, but you are right. It comes with trust, but it works well. It works so well. And I think you've got to be in a similar target space who you're both targeting as well. That's quite important.
Yeah, that idea of having shared clients, but no conflict in the service.
Yeah, lawyers and accountants, they're traditionally very, very good at that, aren't they?
Yeah, and bankers, they're all kind of mixed because they target the same types of businesses. Can I just go back to this idea of choosing your events, because that ties in with that, really, I think. There was a group set up in Birmingham in lockdown, actually, a women's group, and I was invited to speak for them, which I did. I can't remember what the talk was on. I think they now meet in person, right? But they met the first Wednesday of every month or something. And these people were very senior business people in and around the Birmingham area. They're all women, right? No big deal with that. But now that's completely different to, say, the sort of group that you would go to where maybe it's the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Maybe there's a lot of one, solopreneurs, I think the modern phrase is, isn't it really? So when you say you have to kind of pick and choose, you really have to dig around sometimes to find the right event, don't you?
Yeah, and I think when I set up on my own 4 years ago, I'd come, as I said before, I come from a traditional BD cold calling environment. I would say fast forward 4 years, I'd say I've gone from 2 to 3% of my business being referral led to 70, 80%. It's resulted in more exclusive business for me as well, and it's built stronger relationships for me.
Well, I want to go back as well. I know Kirsty's keen to move on, she always is, but I just want to go back to this getting vacancies thing. Right. And I've got two questions for you. So you're essentially making it very clear the kind of clients that you're looking for. And that's important, isn't it? That's the thing, right? So that, because if you don't do that, you're going to get a lot of introductions or leads, which are no use to you, which is a bit embarrassing and has to be dealt with. And of course, it's a waste of the other person's time as well, making those introductions. So this clarity of exactly what I'm looking for is absolutely important. But once you have that, and once you start communicating this to people, can it lead to more, say, retained or exclusive work? I mean, can they get you in? Can they leverage you in so you can leapfrog everybody else and get that work?
100%, because if somebody's specifically recommending you to a contact, you don't have to sell to them as much, because, and especially if that contact, you have actually done work for them or done work in your shared network, and they can use that as a testimonial to their contact as well. That's even stronger. So if you do some piece of work within your network, your first piece, it's a really good way in for when they come to recommend you. But for sure, it's not a hard sell. You're getting past the gatekeeper. Half the time, they don't even really want to know what your business is. Half the time, they trust that recommendation.
There's a thing that's got a name, actually. It's called inherited credibility. Mm-hmm. And it's a thing, right? You can build a business on inherited credibility. What it means is that when we buy things, particularly if we've never bought it before, or if we don't buy it very often, or we don't, for whatever reason, we don't have suppliers that we can rely upon to give us this thing, what we're looking for is certainty. What we actually want is to be 100% certain if we take this person who we don't know and use them, we're going to get a great result, right? That's what we actually want to know. And the fact that somebody you trust has introduced somebody they trust ticks that internal box, and that's why it's so powerful, massively so.
Okay, so I feel like so far we've explained that what we can get from networking events is we can grow our network, the noun, we can grow it and develop it. We can get vacancies, we can get introductions, so we can get kind of connections with intermediaries. Is there anything else that we can get from networking events that isn't maybe directly vacancy related?
Yeah, I think you can get your own suppliers, your own local suppliers. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. I've used services of other people within my network. That's more local. I'm big about supporting local and independent because I'm an independent. Collaboration opportunities, and even collaboration with people in your same space, but you do different things. So yes, we can collaborate with other recruiters, or we can collaborate with other people. So for sure, collaboration opportunities. And I've also being more knowledgeable in your business community. It brings that as well. And you can't quantify that, but knowledge, up-to-date information in your business community, it can increase your confidence, especially if you're a new business owner. And you've got people around you who have been there and done it, who are maybe 5 years ahead of you, 10 years ahead of you. You can get mentors out of it as well. there's
Guidance.
just
I want to say as well, the definition of networking we used earlier is to help you in your personal and professional lives. So professional lives we know about, that's what we're talking about, but personal too. Got to tell you this real quick story, right? And I know Kirsty's going to raise her eyebrows
Quickly.
real quick, right? So there was someone in my network, he's gone now sadly, and he was an ex-director of BT, and I helped his son. It just helped his son. It was no big deal, didn't charge or anything, it was just some advice and help. Anyway, I saw him one time and we were having real trouble with our network here at the house because it kept dropping and they couldn't fix it. And every time we rang through, we went through to a different Indian call center and we had to answer the same questions. And I was going mad with this, right? Because the provider was blaming the supplier and so on and so forth. We couldn't pin it down at all. I said this to him. He said, "Oh, okay, leave that with me. Give us your number." And so we got a phone call the next day from someone who introduced himself as like Ed or someone. He says, "Look, this is my number. You can get me anytime. I'm going to sort this out for you." And within 3 days, the engineer had been out. What he did was they'd stretched a cable in the roof. God knows how long that would have taken. But it was the network that cured that problem for me. Nothing to do with business. And I hadn't directly helped him. I helped someone that mattered to him. So I think you can see this network as not just a business thing. It's a personal thing as well, isn't it? It's to help in your personal or professional lives. Was that quick enough?
Yeah, I'll allow it. And there's somebody, Paul, again, is kind of reinforcing exactly what Kerry said. He gets lots of leads from the consultants, lawyers and accountants who work with his clients. Last week, he was asked to pitch for a CEO role, and it was their lawyer who introduced. And he met the lawyer at an event just before COVID, which, again, Paul, it's like I've paid you to lead me into my next level of questions.
It takes money. It just takes.
Does it? I'll do that then.
£20, yeah.
Obviously, the pandemic, I hate to mention it, it's kind of weird, but when that happened, it changed networking. Everything went very virtual because it kind of had to. We all had Zoom downers and all that kind of thing. And then, obviously, the people are still going now, I think, more back to the in-person events. And it's something, when it comes to virtual events, are they as good as in-person ones? In some places, are they better? What's your feeling on virtual networking? And I'd like to hear the audience about this as well.
I mean, I think it depends on who your target audience is. I can see the pluses and not even negatives. So if you want to open up into markets outside the UK, internationally within Europe, then it's actually a better tool to be in virtual networking groups. Some have a blend where you do both. But I still think the key message, even if you're in a virtual networking group, is the consistency of building the relationships. I still think regardless of whether or not you do that in person or online, the consistency of those relationships. I personally, because the type of person that I am, I do better in face-to-face networking. But if your market, is wider than being more local, then it's great, but you just still need to follow those key steps of being specific, choosing the right one, and putting the legwork in.
I've got another question for you then now, based on that. I don't go to events very often, and the events I do tend to go to are more like the one Paul goes to, really. I'm not in a regular monthly thing or anything. No, I've got no problem with it, but it's just not a thing that I do. But having spoken to you about this subject many times, for you, the event is only part of the relationship, isn't it? So you interact between events. I presume you might have a WhatsApp group, perhaps, that you're in. I presume that you could pick the phone up because you've got their mobile numbers and just speak to someone. So how much is the actual event part of the solution? And are there any other things, as I've just kind of hinted at, that you would do to build that relationship outside of the event?
Look, I see it as a small part, a really small part. It's like internet dating. It's like an initial introduction, and then you've then got to do the rest afterwards. It's like that initial kind of online internet dating. Do you like that person? Click. No, not that I'm do internet dating.
No, it's accurate. Trust me on that one.
I must talk to Mr. Swift about that at some point.
But I think it's then about nurturing those those relationships for sure. After that, so that's. Sorry, what was the next part of the question?
No, I just wanted to talk about that as well, because I know certainly people starting out, I was going to say young because that's ageist and you can't be that way. Someone just starting out in their career, whether it's in recruitment or anything else, there is this perception, and I know this for a fact in professional services, lawyers and accountants, because we get it all the time. Oh, well, look, just go to an event. You'll be fine. Go to an event. And so they think we'll just go and then suddenly magically the work will come from the event. And what we're talking about here is a much broader and wider range of activities to build and maintain a network, of which is going to an event every month or whatever and seeing someone and having a chat with them. But you do have to put the legwork in as well, don't you, between the events?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think at first it can be overwhelming because you try and go to every single one that's out there. Choose one or two and do a really good job in one or two, then try and go to 5 or 6 where it holds no value. So choose those ones where you know you can put the commitment in and the time in. But that's also about you being precious with your time as well. So when you're having those one-to-ones, they are for a reason. So yeah, for sure, don't spread yourself too thin. Don't go everywhere and anywhere, and specifically choose the ones that are right for you. It goes back to the research and choosing the right ones.
And what you said earlier as well, you can test them out and you can go and you can see whether it's the right thing to you before you commit to it, which I think is a very sensible piece of advice, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so we had some responses when I asked kind of what do people in the audience think, and a lot of people agree with you, Kerry. So Alison prefers in-person events, although agreeing with you that you can reach a wider audience online. Michelle's made a really good point. Online is a good tool as it takes less time out of your day. That is true because you don't have the travel and aspect. But she said that she finds it hard to build a rapport online as opposed to face-to-face. But that is, again, talking about what you just spoke about, taking the kind of event itself as a jumping off point, as it were, and then you kind of. I'd love to
only part of the answer, really. It's just a part of it, whether it's in person or virtual. And I agree with Alison. Actually, I'm very much around the in person if I'm going to do it at all. But I think that you're right. It is efficient to have a blend of online and in person, isn't it?
And that's what Judith says here. A couple of her groups do both online and in person, so you can keep in touch. But I think the power of I'm very awkward online and on phone and stuff like that. But in person, my awkwardness is adorable, so it works for me in a different way. But we'll move on. Moving on swiftly.
Who's told you that? Who's told you that?
I am adorable. How dare you? How dare you? So
I think Kerry said that, but okay.
Final question, ignoring him. Final question, Kerry, that I've got for you is, particularly as we spoke about, Mike, if you're not used to networking, or perhaps you started your career like during COVID or just after, there might be an element of nerves around networking. And even if you're really kind of good at business development, you may not necessarily feel confident doing networking. So what advice do you have to somebody who's going to start networking and start mixing? What advice do you have for them?
Outwardly, I can be an extrovert, but at times I can be an introverted extrovert. And when I first started going 4 years ago, I lost my voice and I felt overwhelmed. Seriously, I felt overwhelmed. I felt really quiet. I didn't have a voice. There was these really big characters there. So yeah, it goes back to choosing the right group, but it also goes back to be yourself and be who you are. Never change who you are. Because I think it's really important, like going back to school, you feel like the new person and you feel like you've got to fit in. Try and fight against that. But a tip could be speak to the organizer first, especially if you're nervous. Explain to them you're a bit nervous. Is there anyone on the day that they can recommend that you speak with first, or get them to arrange for you to meet them first when you get there, or take a colleague with you, or take someone you trust at first, because it can be really, really daunting if you're not used to it.
I think on that as well, I mean, as I said, events aren't necessarily the biggest of things for me, although we've had some good results from them actually over the years. But I think being able to introduce yourself, I know it's a weird thing because you can all say, hello, my name's Mike, for sure. But if you can get some really key information about yourself over, not pitching or selling or anything like that, but if you can very confidently, and confidence is the word really, if you can confidently introduce yourself, it starts the conversation and then you're kind of away, then you're off. It's fine. It's like you're talking to your mates down the pub. So I would suggest that people practice that first, hello, I'm Mike, that kind of conversation. And I was used to do it with a question. So I would say, oh, hello, I'm Mike. So tell me, Kerry, what exactly do you do? So I'm putting it onto them straight away, really. And there's no right or wrong, it's just my way, really. And then I can say, because then they'll say, what do you do, Mike? And I say, well, I work with, and what I do is, those kind of key questions. But do you not think having that confidence to be able to introduce yourself and start a conversation just makes the whole thing so much easier?
It does, and it takes time, and it will change. It will change as the confidence grows and the environment that you're in. But yeah, I remember practicing and like reading it out at the first one like a robot, and like my hand was shaking. And I'm an outwardly confident person. I really, really am. But I was like, oh, what do I say? And I don't understand the 60-second pitch. And I think it's when you hear those words, it just scares the living hell out of you. But yeah, practice is key. Say it, speak as if you're saying it to a friend or in conversation, and don't make it sound too stilted and too salesy.
I think as well, keeping in mind that everybody in there wants you to do well. No one's in there like judging you. Everybody at networking events is there to network. So they're normally very, welcoming and kind people, like you say. So I think keeping that in mind is always helpful. That's what I have to do to get over my nerves. Anyway, how it lives its life. Right, we are unfortunately coming towards the end of our time. Kerry, I could listen to you for days. And by the way, if anyone else has got any tips, pop them in the comments and maybe I'll share them if we've got time at the end. But Kerry, in a second, I'm going to come to you and ask for your top tip about what somebody can do if they want to start using Network. Perhaps they haven't started it already, or perhaps they've got team members who are a bit nervous. So I'm going to come to you in a second. But Mike, first, can we talk about who we've got next week? Because we're trying to get some on.
Well, yes, I'd love to be able to commit to this, but it's probably going to be one of two subjects. What we want to do is get someone on to specifically come and talk to us about an expert in the field on the future of AI in recruitment. And he's right at the front of it. We're just having a few difficulties with dates at the moment. So let's see if we can sort that one out. It may have to be a special. We may have to just book it when we can book it and look as happy as we can. If not, I suspect we're going to do something focused on how to get exclusive or retained work. There's just a simple little tool that you can use, which I'm going to show you, which will dramatically increase the chances of getting that kind of work, if that's what you want, obviously. So it's going to be one of those two, I think.
And that will be on the 6th of July. So, Kerry, now it's come time to you. So somebody's watching this and they're thinking, right, I want to get into networking. What's the first thing that I should do or my first team member should do?
I actually think the first one is know your target client base. I was just about to say that. Thank you. We didn't rehearse this, promise. You do need to know who your client base is, who you're targeting, because you won't have a clear message then, and you won't know who you want to connect with, and you won't know who you want to speak with. And people used to say that to me, and I used to think, oh, bloody hell, can't be bothered with that. And you feel like it's a lot of work, but it isn't. And it will change, but understanding your target audience and your client.
No, that's the ideal client profile that we're talking about there, really, isn't it? And we've done shows on that before, but essentially it's two things. It's the company that you deal with. It's having an avatar on the company, a way of describing the characteristics of that company. And it's the decision maker, the kind of person that you would talk to who works for that company, who can be your entry or can introduce you to the person that you need. So if you're looking at that, which I think is a great top tip, it's a real, in fact, it's networking rule number 2. Be sure you know who to put in your network. I mean, that's a really key thing, which is what you're saying there. But also, can I add one as well? Have we got time for me to just?
I'll allow it.
I'm going to think of this, and it's only really based on what Kerry's been saying. She said about 3 times, which I think is really important. Not only have you got to make it clear for other people as to what you're looking for, it's important so that they know the right kind of people to introduce you to if they can. But I think it's as important, arguably more important, to know what other people want from you, because if you don't understand that clearly, you could end up making introductions to people that aren't suitable, which is a bit embarrassing and a bit of a waste of time. And suddenly you're no longer a sort of an advantage to be known by somebody. You're sort of a bit of a liability in a sense. Oh no, another introduction from Mike Ames. Oh, It's going to be somebody else that's no relevance to me at all. So I think you have to put more effort into understanding what other people are looking for so you can match that up, and as at the same time make clear what you're looking for.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, guys, we've come to the end of our time. So first of all, I want to say a massive thank you to you, Kerry. You've been a great guest, as I knew you would be. The queen of networking crown is still on your head. So thank you very much for coming. You're blushing. I love it. Mike, I should say thank you to you just for being, yourself. Just being.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Oh, I won't then.
Can I also say as well, Kerry, thank you for coming on board, because obviously we talk quite a lot, and I love dealing with you, but I love this long-term relationship-driven approach that you have to making your business bigger. Just think it's awesome, and it's something that I think everyone can emulate. So thank you for coming on the show.
100%.
Oh, and thanks, Kirst. Whatever.
Oh yeah, thank you to me, and thank you to everybody who's been watching. We've had some great comments come in today, so thank you. It's always fun when we get those. So thank you very much, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.
See you next time, guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye.